This interview is being held on May 7th, 2018 in Cleburne, Texas. I am Penny Galt, and I am a member of Mary Isham Keith Chapter, National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. I will be interviewing Dale Gregory. Also in attendance is Laura Tozell. Dale, where were you born?
I was born in Tomahawk, Wisconsin in 1925.
Okay. What month?
November.
November
23rd.
23rd. Was it around Thanksgiving that year?
I don't know.
It's usually around that time.
Yes, it was
Right.
on Thanksgiving this year.
Oh,
Yeah.
well.
Be the day after coming up.
Well, that's fun. What was your father's full name?
Kenneth Hubert Gregory.
Okay. And what did he do for a living?
He was a welder and auto mechanic.
Okay.
He welded in the shipyards in Seattle during the war.
Okay. What was your mother's full name?
Mildred Benita Cottrell.
Okay. And where was she born?
Irma, Wisconsin.
Okay. Did she work outside of the home?
Yes. In fact, during the war, she worked for Boeing Aircraft in Seattle.
Okay. Do you have any brothers or sisters?
No.
Okay. Were you or are you married?
I was married,
Okay.
yes.
What was your wife's name?
Louise Gregory.
Okay. What was her maiden
Olson
name? Olson
Gregory,
Gregory. Okay. And do you have any children?
I have 3 stepchildren by Louise and one of my own.
Okay. Would you give their names?
Scott Gregory, I adopted them all, and Carol Gregory, and Corey Gregory, and Kenneth Gregory.
Okay. Did any of them serve in the military?
Scott and Corey both were in the Air Force for a period of time, yes.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service? Before you entered the military?
I was going to high school.
Okay, so you were young.
Hmm?
You were young.
Very young, yes. I graduated in the mid-year terms because my birthday was in November, and by March I was in the service.
Oh.
March of '44.
So were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
You were drafted. And what branch of the military did they draft you into?
Infantry.
In the infantry, in the Army?
Yes.
In the Army. Okay. Do you remember the date that you entered the military service?
March, I don't remember the day.
March of
1944.
1944. So the war was still going strong.
Oh, yes.
when you entered.
Yes.
Okay. Starting from the day you left home to go into the military, tell me about your military service, about your life.
Well, I spent 10 days in quarantine in Fort Lewis, Washington. I was living in Seattle at the time, and then we got on a troop train and I ended up at Camp Hood, Texas, where I did my training. And completing training, I had a few days at home in Seattle, and then I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where I joined the 70th Infantry Division, the Battle Axe Division, and they've completed their organization there, and then we went by troop train to Boston and boarded a ship in Boston. And we had to sit in the harbor for 3 days because of a storm. We couldn't get out of there. So I had my 19th birthday on the ship in Seattle.
Had you ever
or
been
in
on?
Boston.
Had you ever been on a ship before?
No.
So this was your first time. Had you
Yeah.
ever been on a train before you went on the troop train?
Oh yes, yes,
So that was,
yeah.
I'm digressing right now, but I'd like to know a little bit. What were the troop trains like? I mean, was it crowded? Was it like trains we see today, or what was it?
Those were regular trains. We sat in seats, and they were not crowded at all. Now that wasn't the case when we went in Europe, but
Right. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit
yes.
when we get over there. Okay, so you're in Boston, and you had to stay there, and you spent your 19th birthday on the ship.
yes.
Okay, so now what?
We were on a converted luxury liner, and so it was fast enough that they sent us over unescorted because we could outrun the submarines, and we went across the Atlantic through the Straits of Gibraltar into the Mediterranean and landed at Le Havre, France. And the France had just been, or Le Havre had just been cleared of the Germans not more than 10 days before we landed there. So there was still the smell of death in the air there. That was our first experience. And after we got our equipment out and gone, then we got onto a troop train where we put as many as we could lay down in the floor of a boxcar, on each boxcar, and we traveled a day and a half up to France, and took our positions on the I have to get this straight because I said Stuttgart before, and that wasn't correct. Anyway, we went to a town on the Rhine River, and the Germans were on the other side. And that was our first experience of being on the front lines, and that was Christmas Eve of 1944.
Could you see them? Could you see?
Oh yes.
So you could see
Yes.
them across the river?
Yes, and if you strolled down the street, you might get shot at.
Oh my goodness.
But it was long distance. But we stayed on the Rhine for about a week. Then they moved us further north to the southern flank of the Battle of the Bulge, and we took our positions on the Battle of the Bulge, and we were there out on the point for a matter of about a week, and then the Germans broke through both to the south of us and to the east of us to try to pinch us off and surround us. So we had to retreat out of that position. One of my first experiences of real close combat was while they sent me out on a little creek with a bazooka because there was tanks coming up the road, and I was to take and shoot that tank, and they sent me out all alone without a extra man to help load the bazooka.
Oh my goodness.
But luckily, I could hear the tanks down the road, but it never did come up my way. So,
Oh, that was lucky, that was good.
yes.
So you were out there just by yourself? If that tank had come, you would have to shoot, reload, and try and shoot again before they got hold of you.
That's right, and I didn't have a helper to help reload.
I bet that was scary.
Yes, it was.
Oh,
But we were there for about a week, and then with this pincer action, we had to retreat out of that area and fall back about 17 miles, and so again they had fixed dynamite on a bridge over a small river out of this area, and they posted me there to blow the bridge when everybody got out.
again by yourself?
By myself, yes.
They had a lot of confidence in you.
So they truckload after truckload of fellows came out through there, and finally I started asking, are you the only ones, last ones? And finally one truck says, we're the last ones. So I told them to pull up a few yards and wait, and I blew the bridge and went up there and got on the truck and rode with them up till I caught up with my unit and got out, and then finished hiking the rest of the way. And we went up on a mountain in the woods there, in a little trail up there that was no bigger than a Jeep could get up. So we sat up there most of the winter and had nothing to live in but a foxhole that we dug. Dug a foxhole big enough to lay down in, and cut trees with about 6 inches or 5 inches into little logs and laid across the top of the foxhole, and left a hole big enough to crawl down in there, and that was my home for most of the winter. And you spent 4 hours on duty, on watch, and 8 hours off. And my only heat was the cans of cleaner for the rifles and the patches. Stick the patch in there and light it and get a little torch, and that was warmth.
That was the only heat you had. It had to have been awfully cold.
It was a very cold winter. Many fellows were out with frostbite in their feet and all.
But what did you do if you were on for 4 hours and off for 8? When you were on for 4 hours, were you standing guard? Anna?
Yes, okay. To be standing guard.
Okay.
And I was, then I was transferred to the reconnaissance patrol, and so we had to go on patrol out in the woods to find where the enemy was, because it was very uncertain just where each line was. And it had been snowing, so everything was white and nice, and we were in these olive drab uniforms, and the Germans had white coats over their uniforms, so they were white. And they saw us long before we saw them,
I bet so.
and they pinned us down. We had to call for artillery. It was such close in firing that they had to send in a smoke shell to make sure they didn't shoot on us. And we got the artillery firing in there and sent them on their way so we could get up and get out of there. But and we only had one man got a shell. He was behind a rotted log, and the shell came through the log and lodged under his kneecap.
Ooh.
But that was our only casualty in that encounter, but it was a close and scary time.
I can imagine.
But then we spent the whole of the winter up there on that mountain, and come spring we came down and we started fighting town to town. We came into the little town of Nancy, France, and Nancy had been taken by the Germans, retaken by the American troops, retaken by Germany again, and we were going back through it for the last time. There wasn't much of the town left.
Yeah.
It was pretty well dilapidated.
Mm. Were there people still in the town though? Were there still people living there?
Some were still find some shelter there yet.
Right.
But then it was just a matter of our fighting back to the Saar River, where the Siegfried line was along the east bank of the Saar River, and we took our positions on that, and we were there for 3 or 4 days observing where the Germans were and where their strength was. And when it became time that we had all the information we needed, our regiment was the first one across the Saar River into German territory. And then things started breaking for the American troops, and everything started flowing pretty fast from then on.
And this was when? 1945?
1945, yes. And by May, the Germans surrendered.
Okay. Okay. When you were, of course, you were in Europe. You were in Europe. When you were up on the mountain by your unit was up there for the whole winter. What did you do when you were not standing guard? I mean, it was so cold and barren.
Well, we'd build small fires to keep warm, and I don't really remember what all we did.
Then apparently it was not really eventful.
Yeah.
You just remember being cold.
Yeah,
Remember how cold it was, right? Other than the times that you were left out on the bridge by yourself to blow it up, or with the bazooka to get the tank by yourself, did you ever fear for your life at any other time?
Oh yeah, yes. On other occasions when we were on reconnaissance, we were in towns then, and we were again searching for where the enemy was at, and we were in a house and we could hear the Germans on the other side of the wall in the same house.
Oh, that would be scary.
We were prepared for hand-to-hand battle there, but it never materialized.
Right. I can imagine your stress at that time. I mean, you're young, 19, 20 years old, but still,
Yeah.
stress level must have been
Yeah.
just horrific
Yeah.
to have your life in danger
Yeah.
almost every day. How were you able to sleep at night? I
Well, that was the hard part because just about the time you were getting to sleep, they'd send an aircraft overhead and sound the alarms and disturb your sleep.
Yeah.
But and there was always shelling of the shells coming in and bursting in the treetops overhead.
I guess sometimes you just get so tired
Yeah.
you sleep.
The good Lord was with me, I think, because I didn't get wounded in any way. And yet, when we were moving down a road and they started shelling us, everybody would hit the ground for cover. Some were in ditches, and I was right in the middle of the road,
Oh, no.
and yet I didn't get hit, but some of the fellows in the ditches did. Many times that was the case. That I have no explanation for it.
Well, you were just very fortunate.
Yeah.
Did you make any lasting friendships when you were in
No.
over there?
No. Friends would be around one day and gone the next. And I had when I joined the 70th, I was trained in intelligence reconnaissance, but that platoon was full, so they put me in the Pioneers. And that was another scary place because while I was in the Pioneers, they do the work of engineers only on a smaller scale. And so we had to help lay communication lines, and the job that was the worst, that I felt the most words leave me.
That's okay.
We came to a field that we suspected was mined with booby traps, and so our infantry line got behind, and two of us had to go out with the minesweepers and find if there were any mines in there and defuse them. And you were a walking target out here in the middle of the armies, but luckily I didn't get shot while I was
That
out
would
there.
be scary.
Yeah.
That would
Yeah.
be really scary. When you were overseas, did you see any USO shows? You know, I can remember
No.
seeing where Bob Hope and all those came over, but
Not a one.
you didn't get to see one. You weren't where they were. Oh.
No.
How did you keep in touch with your family and friends back here in the United States, or did you? Were you able to?
Well, we would get these fold-up envelopes, and you wrote in them a letter and folded it up and gave it to the communications, and they work it back and send it home. But there weren't very many of those to send.
So it was a lonely time for you and for your family back here.
Oh yeah. The loneliest part was that I was unmarried, no children, and after the war, they took all these facts and gave points for them and formed a list of people that they would rotate back home. Well, with no family and no children and all that, my name was way down there on the bottom of the list. And so we were in the Army of Occupation for a while, and fellows were going home, and I was still stuck there, and I began to get a little homesick, and they offered us 90 days at home if we signed up for a year and a half in the regular Army. So I signed up for a year and a half in the regular Army, and then it was 3 months before they still got me on a ship to go home. And I had my 90 days at home, so that left me with a year still to serve, and I served that at Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
So you were able to get back.
Yeah.
But the only way you moved up on the list was because you signed up, you were willing to sign up for a longer
I signed up
service.
for that 90 days at home. Yeah.
Well, they were kind of smart, weren't they? They knew these boys wanted to get back home, and so they got you to sign up for longer.
No.
Well, going back over, now you're still back over in Europe. Where were you when you found out that the war had ended?
We were in the vicinity of Wiesbaden, Germany. I don't know just exactly
Right.
where, but we were somewhere in that vicinity.
How did you hear about it? Did they make an announcement, or because it was so, the war was so spread out and didn't
Yeah.
have internet like we have now.
Oh, the news traveled pretty good, and we had it, I don't know, quite soon after they signed the papers.
Right. Well, did it stop? I mean, did
Yeah,
it just,
yeah,
it stopped immediately? I mean,
Yeah.
you're there and you're in an active fighting unit, and then they get word the war's ended, and then it just stops?
Yeah,
Well, now that was fortunate.
yeah. Then they were talking about taking the 70th Infantry and sending it to the Pacific. But before that became totally organized, things started winding down in the Pacific, so we didn't have to go over there. And they disbanded the 70th Infantry Division, and I was moved over to the 3rd Infantry, and we're the Army of Occupation for about a year after the war,
Okay.
before I got to go home.
Okay. Well, that was fortunate, because otherwise you'd have been in the Pacific. You'd have been
Yes.
on another ship. I never did ask you, what was it like coming over on that ship?
Well, it was a converted luxury liner, and our company drew KP the whole trip over. So for that, we got in the nice staterooms up above. Only thing is, you were in this here stateroom with triple layered bunks on two sides, so there were 6 of us in one small room. But we had to pull KP all the 10 days traveling over there, and the dining room was the ballroom of the ship, and it was down in this lower center of the ship, where in this stormy weather the room was doing this, and I get down there, and about 15 minutes I had to head for the rail.
I bet you weren't alone. I bet you had company.
Yes, there were a lot of us.
Would you like some water? Stop it for a minute. Okay, so you're rocking and rolling on your ship,
Yeah.
trying to get over. And did it ever calm down, or was it a rough journey the whole way?
Oh, no. About the first 2 days, then it calmed down, nice
Right.
calm. We could, when we weren't on duty, we could watch the dolphins following along with us, and nothing eventful.
Right.
Didn't have any encounters with German subs or anything.
On your way back, okay, the war's ended, and then you didn't have to go to the Pacific, and they sent you back by ship, right?
Yes.
Okay, what was your trip back like?
All right, that was on one of those Victory ships that was hurriedly built during the war, and accommodations weren't quite as nice.
Okay, so it was a Victory ship. I don't know that
But-
I've ever heard of a Victory ship.
There was, on that ship, coming home, I relaxed to the point that I'd go up, have a meal, go back to my bunk, and go to sleep till the next meal, go have a meal, and went back and slept. I slept through 3 days,
You were just exhausted.
just nothing but eat and sleep.
Yeah, well, I bet you welcomed that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can only imagine.
I didn't realize how wound up I was, actually.
Right, right, I can't imagine. Well, when you got back home, okay, when you landed, was your family there when you landed?
Oh no, I landed in New York and got on a train and traveled, well, by that time they were back in Wisconsin, so I only had to travel to Wisconsin, and spent my 90 days in my hometown. And when I went back to New York, my orders were to go back overseas again. But when I got back to New York, and the officer said, well, do you want to go back? And I said, well, not that I don't have to. My orders just say I'm supposed to. He says, well, you'll take care of that. And he redlined it and sent me to Campbell, Kentucky, where I spent the last year.
Oh, well, that was fortunate. When you came back for your 90 days, when you first came back, was it hard adjusting back to civilian life?
The only thing that was difficult about it was right around the 4th of July.
Oh.
And I could be visiting with people, and the firecracker go off, and I was on the floor in the middle of the group.
Right. Well, it's just a reaction that you got used to.
Yeah. But to this day, a loud bang, I jump pretty hard.
I can't imagine, but I imagine you just get to where you react. That's just a reaction that you have because it's your life.
Yeah.
When you were in the service, was there one person who was more memorable to you than anyone else? An instructor, a commanding officer, or a friend?
No, it was so fluid in all my moves and the change of personnel within the units when I was there. I never did have some real close friends that I made during the Army. I had good friends, lots of them, but then we'd move on, and, which was kind of my life from the day I was born. Because of the Depression, my dad had to move a lot to have a good job, and we always had food on the table, but I went to a lot of different schools through up to 5th grade, and consequently it has affected me all my life, and I move, and I kind of shove the friends names into X bin and learn new names, and I developed a bad habit.
Well,
I don't remember names.
Well, I have that problem also.
Yeah.
I have a hard time. The wars that are going on right now, you know, the involvement that we have, do you think the media, the newspapers, the TV and all that, do you feel that it's giving an accurate account?
A lot of them are not, no.
Right. Did you, when you were in the service, when you were overseas, do you think the people back in the United States really knew what was going on? Do you think that they were kept?
I really can't.
Nobody ever said.
Yeah.
Whether, excuse me, excuse me. When you came back from World War II, did you feel that people respected your service, that they appreciated what you had done for your country?
Well, there again. See, I was a year after the war before I got home, and all the hoopla was over. So it was just everyday go. Right. And here in 2013, a friend of mine put my name in on the honor flights, and I got a flight over to Washington, D.C. to see the various monuments and all, and but that was kind of a help to because I missed all the parades and all that stuff.
Right, right.
When everything was kind of calm when I got home.
Right, because being so far down on the list, it took you a while to get back here before they got you back here. What are some life lessons that you learned from your military service? Did it teach you anything about how that helped you with your life once you got back into civilian life?
Just that you got to rely on your own energy and knowledge to get ahead. And
You had to become pretty independent and taking care of yourself, I can imagine. Do you have any regrets about being in the military?
What?
Any regrets?
No.
Okay. Your service. Is there something that you would like to say on this interview for people that are going to be seeing this? Your children, your grandchildren, or something in the future? Is there something you'd like to say? The words of wisdom, or just something in general?
No, I really don't.
Okay. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you would like to discuss?
I think I've hit most all of it.
You've covered all of it? Well, I think
When I first came home, I didn't care to talk about it at all. And as the kids were growing up, they'd ask me questions and I'd give them a little answer here and there. And finally, this has been another 20 years ago, I finally got up enough courage to write down most of this for the kids.
that's very good. I'm sure they appreciated that. Well, Dale, I want to thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And the Library of Congress has created, just for veterans who give their interviews, this button, which you can wear. It's from the Veterans History Project.
Oh, yeah.
And only veterans who have given their interviews get those buttons.
Oh,
So
right.
if you wear that and you see someone else with one on, you know that they've given their interview also.
Oh, yeah.
And Mary Ashram Keith would like to give you a certificate of appreciation
Oh,
for
yeah.
allowing us to conduct this interview and for you being willing to talk with us
Well,
about
thank
your military service. I want to thank you for your service. Our freedom is never just handed to us. Someone had to get out there and fight for it. And I want to thank you for being willing to stand in the gap between the United States and her enemies.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dale.
Thank you. Very